Tomo News presents Turbulence.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking.
Prayers and crying aboard US-bound flight as turbulence terrifies passengers. A flight from Korea to the US was diverted to Tokyo after violent turbulence injured 5 people so badly they needed medical attention. Food everywhere, plates, glassware, and the contents of a flipped beverage cart left the cabin looking like a $2 Thai brothel on a Sunday morning. For the 240 passengers and 15 crew aboard American Airlines Flight 280, this was the most terrifying flight of their lives. Screams, sobbing, and whispered prayers filled the cabin as the hand of God shook the plane like a heroin junkie shakes her baby.
I love my family. I love my family very much. Everybody, please.
The turbulence rocked the plane for nearly a full hour. One passenger reported seeing a flight attendant become airborne and smash into an exit sign above the seats.
Hit your head. Show me the bowl that hit your head. It broke.
The Boeing 777-200 took off from Seoul just after 6 p.m. on the 16th and was due to arrive at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport around 3 a.m. The pilot was forced to abort the original plan and land instead at Japan's Narita Airport. None of the injuries were life-threatening, and the passengers were transferred to another flight on Wednesday to complete their journey.
20 injured on South African Airways jet hit by severe turbulence. Passengers on a South African Airways jet had a traumatizing flight after the aircraft was hit by severe turbulence on Wednesday. Flight SA-286 was carrying 165 passengers from Johannesburg, South Africa to Hong Kong. The airliner hit turbulence while crossing Malaysian airspace, as most passengers were sleeping. Some were thrown out of their seats, hitting the ceiling and overhead lockers. The pilot decided not to land in other cities and instead head straight to Hong Kong. He requested Hong Kong to provide assistance upon landing. The plane landed safely at Hong Kong International Airport after noon. 20 passengers were injured, 2 of them seriously. 2 people are receiving medical treatment in Hong Kong but are said to be in stable condition.
Airborne passenger cracks Miami-bound flight ceiling. There's turbulence. And then there's a kind of turbulence that quite literally sends passengers airborne, the latter of which being the variety experienced by those unfortunate enough to be aboard a recent American Airlines flight that saw 5 injured. Despite the fact that the seatbelt sign was on, passengers and even the pilots aboard Flight 982 had no idea what was in store for them as they made their way from Grenada to Miami Thursday morning. They were initially greeted by some slight rumbling, apparently without incident. When the turbulence came back to rear its ugly head, though, it struck one sleeping non-seatbelt wearing passenger with a vengeance. A sudden turbulence-induced plunge reportedly sent an unidentified man flying skyward so fast he smacked into the ceiling and broke one of the Airbus A319's top panels. Ouch! Luckily though, the man's cranium didn't properly puncture the aircraft, causing something like this to happen. Phew! Close call. The plane eventually made a successful landing despite the bumpy ride, which apparently came courtesy of Hurricane Joaquin.
A Singapore Airlines flight recently caused a scare during breakfast when turbulence caused the plane to lose altitude and sent meal trays and a few passengers into the ceiling. The Boeing 777-300ER, carrying about 350 people, was on its way from Singapore to London as breakfast was being served. The plane began to experience turbulence and the captain ordered the attendants back to their seats.
Calm down, get a hold of yourself.
Please let me handle this.
But it only got worse as the plane dropped more than 100 feet. Unfastened meals and passengers went airborne and smacked up against the ceiling, causing quite a mess. Nobody was seriously hurt, and even if they didn't get breakfast, they got dessert, as flight staff handed out chocolates. A total of 11 passengers and 1 crew member sustained minor injuries in the incident and were attended to by medical staff upon arriving at the airport.
American Airlines flight lands in Narita after severe turbulence leaves 14 injured. An American Airlines flight from Korea to the US was forced into an emergency landing in Japan after several crew and passengers were injured after hitting turbulence. American Airlines Flight 280 departed from Seoul at 6:14 on Tuesday, with 240 passengers and 15 crew on board, when it passed through some turbulence caused by a nearby winter storm. Several passengers were injured by the turbulence, forcing the Dallas-bound plane to turn around and make an emergency landing at Narita Airport in Japan, where 14 passengers and crew were treated for injuries. 4 passengers and 1 crew member were later taken to hospital for further treatment. The plane is set to continue its journey to Dallas-Fort Worth on Tuesday.
Passengers thrown around like rag dolls after Aeroflot flight hit severe turbulence. At least 27 people, including babies, were hurt after an Aeroflot flight hit severe turbulence on Monday morning. Aeroflot flight SU-270 was traveling from Moscow to Bangkok and was about 40 minutes from its destination when it hit clear air turbulence. This type of turbulence occurs during clear cloudless skies and cannot be detected by radar. Under these conditions, airplanes experience severe turbulence when they move through the space between fast and slow jet streams. 3 passengers on the Aeroflot flight reportedly required surgeries to treat leg fractures and broken ribs. Some passengers said they saw babies with bruises after the incident. The company has said they will cover the medical costs of those who were injured.
Technical issues shake plane. Pilot tells passengers to pray. AirAsia X passengers headed to Kuala Lumpur from Perth, Australia on Sunday were subjected to a rumbling cabin that just wouldn't let up for almost 2 hours. The flight took off just before 7 a.m. on June 25th, but after about an hour of smooth sailing, many of the 359 passengers say they heard a loud bang that caused the plane to shake like a washing machine. The technical difficulties unrelenting, the pilot decided to turn the plane around. On 2 separate occasions during the turbulent ride back to Earth, he advised everyone on board to pray. 2 minutes prior to touching ground, the pilot then told them to hold the braced seating position in case of a bumpy landing. Though a nightmarish experience, passengers say the landing was smooth. The steady pilot received a thunderous applause and shook hands with each person as they deboarded the plane. The airline released a statement saying the shakiness was the result of a technical issue related to the engine.
Horrific turbulence on United flight sends 12 to the hospital. Passengers and crew members on board a transatlantic flight were all traumatized after their plane was thrown about by massive forces mid-air. United Airlines Flight 880 was flying from Houston to London with 220 people on board when they encountered a mid-air scare. The plane hit turbulence just over the Atlantic, which caused it to shake and drop violently. Passengers that had been sleeping moments earlier were now flying out of their seats. Others got cuts and bruises from being banged around the cabin. Despite being just 300 miles from London, the plane diverted to Ireland. 12 had to be brought to the hospital once the plane landed around 6 a.m. Flights in the past have had similarly horrific experiences in the sky, caused by clear air turbulence, and the same may be true for the United flight. Clear air turbulence typically occurs in the cloudless skies of the upper atmosphere. It's mostly generated when a plane moves across fast-flowing air currents called jet streams. Here, high-speed winds and slow-moving air traveling in different directions can cause sudden and violent movements to a passing aircraft. Clear air turbulence is difficult to detect, and likewise hard to avoid. So unless commercial aircraft start strapping on LiDAR technology, passengers will just have to buckle up and hang on.
6 passengers and 2 crew members were injured on Tuesday when a Hong Kong-bound Cathay Pacific plane from San Francisco encountered severe clear air turbulence over Japan. Commercial aircraft usually fly between the troposphere and stratosphere. Clear air turbulence is usually generated in the high troposphere. Clear air turbulence is created when a plane moves along the edges of a jet stream, a fast-flowing narrow band of strong wind, at high altitudes. Aircraft are also susceptible to clear air turbulence when passing mountainous terrain, which disturbs the horizontal flow of air. Scientists say global warming can lead to more frequent clear air turbulence.
Extreme turbulence injures 5 on AirAsia X flight. On May 4th, AirAsia X Flight 337 traveling from Taipei to Kuala Lumpur encountered severe turbulence. 5 people among the 291 passengers and 11 crew were injured as bodies were launched from their seats, dining carts were upended, and food and utensils strewn about the cabin. Smartphone video of the moments immediately after the terrifying mid-flight experience has since gone viral. Malaysian media reported the flight landed safely at Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 4:30 p.m. local time. The injured passengers received treatment at the airport, and several were later taken to hospital. Air Asia X management has yet to provide detailed information about the severity of the passengers' injuries.
You okay? Am I questioning you?
No.
Should we?
Let's.
Turbulence on Air Canada flight injures 20. At least 20 people were injured on a flight that was reportedly hit by heavy turbulence on Wednesday, prompting the aircraft to make an unscheduled landing in Calgary. Air Canada Flight 88 en route to Toronto, Canada, carrying 332 passengers and 19 crew members, departed from Shanghai, China on Wednesday. During the flight, the aircraft encountered heavy turbulence that resulted in at least 20 passengers suffering neck and back injuries. The plane then made an unscheduled landing in Calgary, in Alberta, Canada. According to reports, 8 passengers were removed from the plane on stretchers. 2 investigators have been sent by the Transportation Safety Board of Canada to review the contents of the plane's black box and interview Air Canada employees to determine the cause of the injuries. Severe turbulence throws passengers out of their seats on Qatar flight. Some 300 people flying from Washington to Doha on state-owned Qatar Airways this Sunday had a pretty bumpy ride. It all started when a passenger began suffering what was initially believed to be a heart attack. This prompted the captain to divert mid-flight to a Portuguese military base on Azores for an emergency landing. The thing is, during this diversion, the plane reportedly hit severe turbulence upon descent. How bad was it? The plane apparently dropped so steeply, it threw people out of their seats. According to reports, a 3-year-old boy was sent flying across the aisle onto another passenger's lap. Several passengers hit the ceiling, and some were left bleeding. 1 passenger broke a leg. 3 received treatment at a local hospital. Oh, and the heart attack that led to the diversion ended up not being a heart attack after all.
Several people were injured after a Montana-bound United Airlines flight encountered severe turbulence on Monday. A United Airlines Boeing 737 jet was headed to Billings, Montana from Denver, with 114 passengers and 5 crew members on board. Violent turbulence struck the plane during landing. The turbulence sent the plane into a sharp drop, and a woman struck her head on the ceiling, cracking a panel. After the plane landed safely in a Billings airport, 3 flight attendants and 2 passengers were taken to the hospital. The airline said that its flight safety team will review what happened.